Maxine Waters thought she could humiliate Senator Kennedy with one insult. "You're an ignorant Southern Trump puppet, an embarrassment to the Senate." Kennedy adjusted his glasses slowly, reached into his battered briefcase, and pulled out 23 folders. "Well, Congresswoman," he drawled, "my mama taught me that when someone calls you ignorant, you should educate them." He opened the first folder. "Class is in session, and tuition is free." What happened over the next 3 hours would make her own lawyer abandon her on live television, and a 78-year-old woman who had voted for her since 1991 tear up 30 years of voting stickers and whisper two words, "Never again." The House Financial Services Committee hearing room buzzed with anticipation on that October morning in 2025. Maxine Waters stood at the witness table, her presence commanding the attention of every camera, every reporter, every progressive activist who had arrived before dawn to support her. She had been granted special questioning privileges for what was supposed to be a routine hearing on banking regulations. But everyone knew the real purpose. Waters was here to eviscerate Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana, to destroy the man who had become a thorn in the side of every corrupt politician in Washington. "Senator Kennedy," Waters began, her voice dripping with contempt, "you sit there in your expensive suit with your Southern drawl pretending to care about ordinary Americans while you defend a wannabe dictator who tried to destroy our democracy." The gallery erupted in applause. Signs waved, "Resist, defend democracy, Waters for justice." The mainstream media section was packed, their stories already half written about Kennedy's impending humiliation. "You represent everything backward about this country," Waters continued, her finger jabbing the air. "You and Donald Trump, you're relics of a racist past that we're working to overcome. You stand for division, for hatred, for turning Americans against each other." Kennedy sat quietly at the witness table, his silver hair, perfectly styled wire-rimmed glasses perched on his nose. He wore a charcoal suit that did indeed look expensive, though not ostentatious. As Waters' attacks grew more personal, several observers noticed something peculiar, the slight upturn at the corner of his mouth as if he were enjoying a private joke. "You've never known struggle," Waters declared, her voice rising with righteous anger. "You've never had to fight for anything. You've never represented people who actually needed help. What gives you the right to sit in judgment of those of us who actually care about the working poor?" She paused for effect, basking in the approving murmurs from her supporters. The cameras captured every moment, the viral clips already being edited in real time by progressive media outlets. Kennedy continued, taking notes on the legal pad before him, his expression serene. When Waters finally paused, expecting him to be rattled or defensive, he looked up with what appeared to be genuine warmth in his pale blue eyes. "Thank you for that passionate speech, Congresswoman," Kennedy said in his characteristic Louisiana drawl, each word measured and wrapped in Southern courtesy. "You raise important points about understanding different experiences and caring for struggling Americans." He adjusted his glasses and opened the thick manila folder that had been sitting closed on the table throughout Waters' tirade. "And speaking of caring for struggling Americans," Kennedy continued, his tone remaining conversational, "perhaps we should explore your record on that subject. Specifically, let's discuss how you've helped the people of your district over the past few decades." The committee room, which had been buzzing with whispered conversations, suddenly grew quiet. "Before we discuss my supposed failings," Kennedy said, "I have some questions for you, ma'am. Questions about your career, your choices, your priorities." Waters' confident expression flickered for just a moment. Something in Kennedy's tone, that gentle, almost regretful quality, suggested this wasn't going to be the hearing she had planned. Kennedy pulled out the first document from his folder. "Let's start with something simple. Your family, because family is important, isn't it, Congresswoman?" "What are you implying?" Waters demanded, but her voice had lost some of its earlier strength. "I'm not implying anything," Kennedy replied with exaggerated courtesy. "I'm about to show everyone exactly what I mean." He held up a document for the cameras. "These are Federal Election Commission filings, public record, available to anyone who cares to look." The room held its breath. Tell me, Congresswoman. Kennedy said, his Louisiana drawl somehow making the question sound both polite and devastating. How long has your daughter Karen been on your campaign payroll? Waters gripped the edge of the witness table. The hunter had become the hunted, and everyone in the room could see it. The Southern gentleman with the gentle smile and devastating documents had just begun his methodical destruction of one of the progressive movement's most prominent voices. Kennedy pulled out a stack of documents, each one labeled with neat typescript. He arranged them methodically on the table, taking his time, letting the tension build. Congresswoman Waters, your daughter Karen has been paid from campaign funds for over 2 decades now, Kennedy began. Not for traditional campaigning, not for door-knocking or phone banking or the hard work of grassroots organizing. No, she's been paid for running something called a slate mailer operation. He looked up at the cameras, then back at Waters. For those watching who might not know what that is, let me explain. A slate mailer is essentially an endorsement pamphlet. Candidates pay to appear on it, and it gets mailed to voters. It's common in California state politics, but Congresswoman Waters is the only federal politician who runs one. Kennedy paused, letting that sink in. The only one. Isn't that interesting? Waters tried to interrupt, but Kennedy continued smoothly. Now, here's where it gets fascinating. Your daughter Karen receives enormous fees for managing these mailers. Donors give money to your campaign, thinking they're supporting your re-election. But much of that money ends up paying your daughter to send out endorsements of other candidates. He didn't cite the specific amounts. Instead, he pulled out a photograph and placed it on the committee's display screen. This is Maria Gonzalez, Kennedy said, his voice softening. She lives in your district, Congresswoman. Maria works 2 jobs, cleaning offices at night and in the early morning. She leaves her first job at 5 a.m., gets home to wake her daughter for school, then goes to her second job. The photo showed a tired woman in a cleaning uniform, her eyes kind but exhausted. Maria's daughter has asthma, Kennedy continued. Severe asthma. Do you know what Maria told my staff when we spoke to her? She said she has to choose every month between her daughter's medication and groceries. He placed another photo on the screen. This one showed a woman at a resort smiling, cocktail in hand designer sunglasses. This is your daughter Karen, Congresswoman, on vacation, one of many vacations funded by campaign donations from people like Maria. The contrast was devastating. The gallery, which had been so supportive of Waters moments ago, was now completely silent. While Maria chooses between medicine and food, Kennedy said, his voice carrying genuine emotion, your daughter vacations on donor money, money that people gave thinking they were supporting your fight for them. Waters tried to speak. This is all legal. It was approved. Let me introduce you to someone else, Kennedy interrupted gently. He gestured to a man sitting in the gallery. This is Marcus Johnson. He used to own a small restaurant in your district. Family business, been there for 20 years. When the pandemic hit, Marcus struggled. He reached out to your office for help. Do you remember how many times he called Marcus? Marcus stood, his voice thick with emotion. 12 times in 2 years. I never got a call back, not once. My life savings disappeared, my restaurant closed, and I kept seeing her on TV talking about fighting for small businesses. Kennedy let the words hang in the air. Marcus lost everything, Congresswoman. But your daughter, she got richer. He pulled out another photograph. This is LaShonda Williams. She owned a bakery in your district. Beautiful place, served the community for years. She had the same experience as Marcus. Called your office 47 times in 2 years. 47 times begging for help with grants, with permits, with anything. She never heard back. The photograph showed an empty storefront, windows boarded up, dreams destroyed. LaShonda's bakery closed 3 years ago, Kennedy said quietly. She lost her life's work. But you know what didn't close? Your daughter's bank account. That kept growing. He turned back to Waters. Now you're going to tell me this is all legal, that you got approval for this arrangement years ago. And technically you're right. You got approval for one election, one. But you've been treating that approval as permanent permission for over 2 decades. Kennedy's voice took on an edge. You found a loophole and crawled through it for 20 years while people in your district suffered. The money your daughter has made could have funded after-school programs for hundreds of kids, could have helped dozens of small businesses survive, could have provided medical care for families like Maria's. He displayed a final image children in a rundown park, their faces filled with hope despite their surroundings. But instead, Kennedy said, it paid for your daughter's lifestyle, for vacations and luxury and comfort. While the children you were elected to represent played in parks with broken equipment and dangerous conditions. Waters found her voice. The FEC approved it. This is all legal. Kennedy looked at her with something like pity. So was slavery once, Congresswoman. Legal doesn't mean right. And you know what else? You stood before these very cameras dozens of times over the years and said, he pulled out a video clip and played it. Waters' own voice filled the room. I fight for the working poor. I represent those who have no voice. I will never stop fighting for the people who need help most. Kennedy stopped the video. Those are your words, ma'am. Now look at these faces. He gestured to the photographs of Maria Marcus LaShonda, the children. Look at them. Which one is the real you, the woman who says she fights for them, or the woman whose daughter gets rich while they suffer? Several Democratic committee members were now staring at their papers, unable to meet anyone's eyes. One quietly removed her I Stand with Maxine button and slipped it into her pocket. You turned desperate people's donations into a family business. Kennedy said, his Louisiana drawl making each word land with devastating precision. You exploited trust, you betrayed hope, and you did it all while claiming to be their champion. The room sat in stunned silence. The progressive activists who had come to cheer Waters' attack on Kennedy were now silent, many with tears in their eyes, not for Waters, but for the people she had failed. Kennedy reached for a remote control, and the committee room's large display screens flickered to life. The images that appeared made several people in the gallery gasp. On the left screen, a sprawling mansion in an upscale neighborhood. Wrought iron gates, manicured lawns, a swimming pool visible through elegant windows. The property stretched across more land than two neighboring estates combined. Tell me, Congresswoman, Kennedy said softly, where is this beautiful home located? Waters straightened her shoulders. Los Angeles. But not where your constituents live, is it? Before Waters could respond, Kennedy clicked the remote. The right screen lit up with a stark contrast, boarded-up buildings, homeless tent cities stretching down sidewalks, yellow crime scene tape fluttering in the wind. Kennedy didn't say anything. He just let the images speak. The silence in the room became uncomfortable, then unbearable, a burned-out liquor store still not rebuilt after decades, children playing in streets littered with trash, families living in cars parked in your district, Congresswoman. Same city, Kennedy finally said. Different worlds. He clicked again. Now the screen showed a side-by-side comparison, Waters' pristine, protected neighborhood on the left and the struggling, decaying neighborhoods of her district on the right. Guess which one you actually care about, Kennedy asked, but it wasn't really a question. He pressed play on a video. An elderly black man appeared on screen, his face lined with years of hard living and harder disappointment. My name is Jerome Thompson, the man said. I'm 67 years old. I've lived in this district my whole life. I voted for Maxine Waters every single time she ran, starting in 1991. Jerome's voice cracked slightly. I believed in her. She said she was one of us, that she'd fight for us, that she'd never forget where she came from, but she never came back. My grandson was shot 2 blocks from my house. Gang violence. He was 16 years old, just walking home from school. The video showed Jerome standing in front of a memorial, flowers and candles, marking the spot where his grandson had died. I wrote to her office. I called. I begged for help, for programs, for anything to stop the violence. I never heard back, not once in 2 years. And then I saw her on TV living in that mansion with the gates and the walls, talking about how much she cares about black communities. Jerome looked directly into the camera. Which black community? Maxine, not mine. You left us behind. Kennedy stopped the video. The silence was profound. Same city, Kennedy repeated. Different worlds. He showed another video. This one featured a woman standing in front of an empty storefront. My name is LaShonda Williams, the woman said, her dignity evident despite the pain in her voice. I owned this bakery for 20 years. It was my dream, my life's work. I employed 12 people from the neighborhood. We were family. She gestured to the boarded-up windows behind her. When crime got bad, when customers stopped coming because they were afraid, I reached out to Congresswoman Waters 47 times. I counted. I needed help with security grants, with business loans, with anything. I never got a response. LaShonda's voice hardened. But I saw her on TV, in her beautiful home, with her security and her walls and her perfect life. And I wondered how many LaShondas are there. How many dreams did she let die while she was comfortable? Kennedy clicked to another image. This one showed Waters' mansion again, but zoomed in on the security features, high walls, iron gates, cameras on every corner. Congresswoman, Kennedy said, his tone almost conversational. I've heard you speak many times about walls, about how walls are immoral, about how we shouldn't build walls to protect our borders. He let that hang for a moment, then gestured to the image. But you have walls protecting you, high walls, strong gates, security cameras, all to keep people away from your mansion. The irony was crushing. Kennedy pulled up a video clip of Waters at a protest. Walls are immoral. No human being is illegal. We should tear down walls, not build them. Then back to the image of her mansion surrounded by walls and gates. Walls for thee, but not for me, Kennedy asked quietly. He showed one final video, a young mother carrying a small child walking down a street in Waters District. It was dusk and the neighborhood looked dangerous. The woman kept glancing over her shoulder, clearly afraid. This is what she walks through every day, Kennedy said. This is the reality for the people you represent. They walk through danger while you walk through gated communities. He showed Waters getting into a luxury car, security escorts on either side, then back to the mother in the dangerous street waiting at a bus stop in the rain, her child shivering beside her. Kennedy's voice dropped to almost a whisper. You don't drink their water. He showed footage of residents complaining about water quality issues in parts of her district. You don't breathe their air, footage of industrial pollution affecting poor neighborhoods. You don't walk their streets. A memorial for another shooting victim, flowers and teddy bears piled high. You don't live their lives. The split-screen again mansion and decay, safety and danger, comfort and desperation. Kennedy stood up, something he rarely did during hearings. At his full height, the elderly senator suddenly seemed to fill the room. Congresswoman Waters, you've served in public office for 44 years, longer than many of your constituents have been alive. And this, he gestured to the images of the decaying district, this is your legacy. This is what decades of your leadership looks like. The screen showed children playing in front of boarded-up buildings, their laughter a heartbreaking contrast to their surroundings. You abandoned them, Kennedy said, and his voice carried genuine sorrow now. You promised to lift them up and you walked away to your mansion. You said you'd never forget where you came from, but you forgot the moment you found somewhere better to be. One final image filled both screens. A young black girl, maybe 10 years old, standing in front of a rundown apartment building, her eyes filled with the kind of hope that only children can maintain in the face of overwhelming odds. Kennedy looked at that image, then at Waters. She still believes someone will help. She still has hope. How long before you take that from her, too? The gallery was completely silent now. Several of Waters' earlier supporters were quietly crying, not for her, for the people she had failed. Kennedy's expression shifted as he closed the folder on the mansion comparisons and opened a new one. His voice took on a more serious tone. But the mansion is just about lifestyle choices, Congresswoman. Now we need to talk about something more serious. We need to talk about betrayal of the public trust. He pulled out documents marked with official government seals. Do you remember 2008, ma'am? Do you remember the financial crisis when American families were losing their homes, their jobs, their hope? Waters shifted uncomfortably. Of course I remember. The economy was collapsing, Kennedy continued. Regular Americans were terrified. They were losing everything they'd worked for. And you, Congresswoman, you had power. You were on the Financial Services Committee. You could help people. He paused, letting the weight of that responsibility sink in. So you used that power. You called Treasury Secretary Paulson personally. You demanded a meeting. You said it was to help minority-owned banks that were struggling during the crisis. Kennedy looked up at Waters. That's what you said, wasn't it? You were helping minority-owned banks. Yes, Waters said. That's exactly what I was doing. Interesting, Kennedy replied. He pulled out another document. Because only one bank showed up to that meeting, One United Bank, and your husband sat on their board, didn't he? Your husband owned significant stock in that bank. The room went silent again. Your husband's investment was about to become worthless, Kennedy said. The bank was failing, but after your meeting, after you used your position and your power, One United received federal bailout money. Your husband's investment was saved. He didn't cite the dollar amount. Instead, he showed photographs. This is James Rodriguez, Kennedy said. The photo showed a middle-aged man standing next to a car packed with belongings. In 2008, James lost his home. He lived in his car with his wife and 2 children for 8 months. James wrote to you, Congresswoman. He begged for help. Kennedy pulled out a letter, the handwriting shaky but desperate. He said, Please, Congresswoman Waters, we have nowhere to go. My children are sleeping in a car. Can you help us? He looked at Waters. Did you ever respond to James? Waters didn't answer. No, Kennedy said quietly. You didn't, because you were busy helping your husband's bank. James never heard back, but your husband, his investment was saved. Another photograph appeared. This is Sarah Chen, single mother, lost her job in the crisis, couldn't afford food, let alone rent. She also wrote to your office multiple times. He held up more letters, a stack of them. 13 letters from Sarah, 13 desperate pleas for help. She wrote, Where is my bailout? Where is my phone call to the Treasury Secretary? Kennedy's voice hardened. Where was it, Congresswoman? Where was Sarah's bailout while you were saving your husband's bank? He let the question hang, then moved to his next revelation. The investigation took 3 years. 3 years while questions swirled. And in the end, you were cleared. Do you remember who wasn't cleared? Kennedy pulled out a photograph of a young man. Your grandson. He was your chief of staff at the time. He took the fall. He said it was all his decision, that he acted alone, that you knew nothing about it. Kennedy looked at the photo for a long moment. He was, 26 years old, starting his career, and he sacrificed his reputation to protect you. He showed another photo, more recent, of the same young man looking worn and defeated. This is him today. He never recovered professionally. His name is still tarnished. Job applications rejected because of that ethics violation on his record. Kennedy's voice dropped. You did this to him, your own grandson. You let him fall on his sword to save your political career. What kind of person does that? Waters tried to speak, but Kennedy wasn't finished. But the bank scandal is just one piece of a larger pattern, he continued. Did you know, Congresswoman, that watchdog groups, liberal watchdog groups, named you one of the most corrupt members of Congress, not once, not twice, 4 times, in 2005, 2006, 2009, and 2011? He showed headlines from liberal publications, progressive organizations calling out her corruption. Even people who agreed with your politics, who supported your positions, who wanted to believe in you, even they couldn't stomach your corruption. Kennedy returned to the photograph of the grandson. But this young man, he said softly, he's the one who paid the price. While American families lost their homes, while Sarah Chen couldn't feed her daughter, while James Rodriguez slept in his car, you saved your husband's bank and sacrificed your grandson's future. He looked directly at Waters. You stood before cameras countless times and said, I fight for the people. I'm on their side. I represent the working poor. He played a montage of clips, Waters saying those exact words over years of speeches. Then he showed the reality James in his packed car, Sarah's empty refrigerator, the grandson's current photo, dreams destroyed. Every promise broken, Kennedy said. Every constituent betrayed, every family member sacrificed, all to protect your power and your family's wealth. He closed the folder. This wasn't just about one bank or one scandal congresswoman. It was about what you represent. People elected you to fight for them. Instead, you fought for yourself, and the people who paid the price weren't your husband. It was your own grandson and every struggling American who needed help and got nothing. The emotional weight in the room was crushing. Several committee members had their heads in their hands. The progressive activists who had come to support Waters were now staring at her with expressions of betrayal and disbelief. Kennedy closed the bank scandal folder and sat in silence for a moment. When he finally spoke again, his voice was different, graver, weighted with something beyond mere political disagreement. "Now we need to talk about something more serious than money," he said. "We need to talk about blood." The room tensed. Kennedy pulled out a remote and pressed play on a video. The screens filled with images of Los Angeles burning, buildings in flames, smoke rising over entire neighborhoods, people running, cars overturned, the chaos and destruction of 1992. Kennedy let the footage play for a full minute. No one spoke. The images spoke for themselves, the violence, the destruction, the terror. After the Rodney King verdict, Kennedy finally said Los Angeles exploded, people died, neighborhoods burned, lives were destroyed. He paused the video on an image of a building engulfed in flames. "And you, Congresswoman, you refused to call them riots. You called them something else. Do you remember what you called them?" Waters lifted her chin. "I called them a rebellion." "A rebellion," Kennedy repeated. He looked at the burning building on screen. "Let me introduce you to someone whose life you rebelled against." A figure stood up in the gallery, an elderly Korean man, dignified despite his obvious emotion. "This is Mr. Kim," Kennedy said. Mr. Kim owned a small grocery store in South Central Los Angeles. He'd built that business over 30 years, came to America with nothing, worked 18-hour days, sent his children to college with money earned from that store. Mr. Kim remained standing, tears streaming down his face. Kennedy showed a photograph. This was Mr. Kim's store on April 30th, 1992. The image showed a building engulfed in flames, the life's work of 3 decades turning to ash. 30 years of work, Kennedy said quietly, gone in one night of the rebellion you justified, the rebellion you romanticized. He turned to Waters. "Mr. Kim is here today. He's been waiting 33 years for you to acknowledge what happened to him. 33 years waiting for you to say his life mattered, that his loss mattered." Kennedy paused. "He's still waiting, isn't he, Congresswoman, because you've never apologized. You've never even acknowledged him." The camera caught Mr. Kim's face, and his grief was devastating. The entire gallery could see it. Many were crying now. "But that was just the beginning," Kennedy continued. "Your relationship with violence didn't end in 1992. He showed a video clip from 2018, Waters at a rally. If you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd and you push back on them." The next video showed the results: a Trump administration official being harassed at a restaurant, his children crying as people screamed at their father. Another official's home vandalized, his family forced to move. "You encouraged this," Kennedy said. "These children had nightmares because you told people to create a crowd and push back." He showed another clip, another family terrorized. "These are real people, Congresswoman, real children who were scared, real families who suffered because of your words." Then Kennedy's voice became even more serious. "But April 2021, that's when you truly showed who you are." He played video of Waters in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota during the Derek Chauvin trial, the nation on edge, everyone praying for peace, for justice without more violence. And there was Waters telling the crowd, "We've got to stay on the street. We've got to get more confrontational. We've got to make sure they know we mean business." Kennedy stopped the video. The most important civil rights trial in decades. Justice for George Floyd hanging in the balance, the entire nation holding its breath, and you told people to get more confrontational. His response from the trial. Congresswoman Waters giving you something on appeal that may result in this whole trial being overturned. Kennedy let that sink in. You almost gave a killer a way out, Congresswoman. You almost destroyed the George Floyd trial. The judge said your words could overturn the entire case. Also, you could have your moment in front of cameras. He showed footage of violence after her comments. Businesses burning, black-owned businesses destroyed. This is a black-owned restaurant, Kennedy said, showing a smoldering storefront. Owned by a family for 2 generations, destroyed after you encouraged more confrontation. The owner appeared on screen. This is not justice. This is chaos. How does destroying my family's business honor George Floyd? Kennedy showed more footage National Guard members, young men and women, trying to keep peace, then showed Waters confronting them. Who are you going to shoot? These young people, Kennedy said, were protecting the city from violence you encouraged, and you harassed them, you terrorized them. They were doing their job trying to prevent bloodshed, and you intimidated them. He leaned forward, his voice filled with genuine anger now. Congresswoman, you've spent decades claiming to represent Black America, to fight for Black communities, to care about Black lives. The screen filled with images of Black neighborhoods destroyed by violence, burned buildings, destroyed businesses, families standing in ruins. This is what your rebellion looks like, Kennedy said. These are Black neighborhoods, Black businesses, Black families. You destroyed them in the name of fighting for them. He showed a final image that broke hearts across the room, a young Black child, maybe 7 years old, standing in front of the burned-out ruins of what used to be his neighborhood. The child's face showed confusion, fear, loss. Kennedy's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. This child doesn't understand why his world is burning, why his neighborhood looks like a war zone, why the store where he used to get candy is gone, why his friend's apartment building is destroyed. He looked at Waters. But you understand, don't you? You understand that you encouraged this, you justified this. You called destruction a rebellion and violence confrontation and chaos activism. The screen split on one side, a peaceful protest with signs and songs, on the other, riots and flames and destruction. You've betrayed everyone who actually wants justice, Kennedy said. The people who march peacefully, who organize, who work for real change, you've made their cause look like chaos. You've given ammunition to every person who wants to dismiss legitimate grievances by pointing to the violence. He showed one final image, Waters' mansion peaceful and protected behind its walls and gates. Then the burned neighborhoods of her own district. You encourage the fire, Kennedy said, but you never get burned. You tell others to be confrontational, but you stay safe. You romanticize rebellion from the safety of your mansion, while the people you claim to represent live with the consequences. His voice rose for the first time. Shame on you, Congresswoman. Shame on you for using violence as a political tool. Shame on you for encouraging destruction that hurt the very people you claim to represent. And shame on you for 33 years of never acknowledging what you did to people like Mr. Kim. The camera panned back to Mr. Kim, still standing, still crying, still waiting for an acknowledgement that would never come. The committee room had changed dramatically over the past hours. Where once it had been packed with enthusiastic Waters supporters, now whole sections sat empty. Democratic committee members had quietly exited one by one, finding urgent business elsewhere. Only a handful of die-hard progressives remained, and even they sat in stunned silence. Kennedy's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then looked up at Waters. Congresswoman, I'm receiving notifications I think you should hear. His voice was almost gentle now, the way someone might speak when delivering news of a death. He read from his phone. Statement from Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Corruption destroys everything we fight for. It betrays the people we serve. This is indefensible. Another notification. Statement from Senator Bernie Sanders' office. We stand for the people, not for personal enrichment. What we've heard today demands accountability. Kennedy looked at the empty Democratic seats. Even Speaker Pelosi has released a statement, though it's notably lukewarm. Waters gripped the table edge. They're abandoning me. After everything. They're not abandoning you, ma'am, Kennedy interrupted quietly. You abandoned them first. You abandoned your principles, your constituents, your promises. They're simply acknowledging what everyone in this room can now see. He gestured to the empty seats. Your own party has left you, not because I destroyed you. You destroyed yourself. Then Kennedy said something that made Waters' blood run cold. But I want you to hear from the people who matter most, the people you were actually elected to serve. He gestured to the gallery. I invited some of your constituents to be here today. They've been sitting quietly listening. Now I think it's their turn to speak. A man stood up. Kennedy recognized him, Pastor Thompson from South Central. The pastor's voice shook with emotion. Congresswoman Waters, I've prayed for you. I've defended you. I've believed in you. I run a church in your district, and every week we feed 100 families. Families who are hungry while you live in luxury. I've called your office begging for help, for resources, for anything. I never heard back. Another person stood, the woman Kennedy had shown in earlier videos. My name is LaShonda Williams. I voted for you 7 times. 7 times I believed you when you said you'd fight for small businesses. My bakery closed while your daughter got richer on campaign money. You betrayed me. More people stood. One after another, constituents rising with stories of neglect, abandonment, broken promises. Then an elderly black woman stood, her hands trembling. She reached into her purse and pulled out a collection of stickers, I voted stickers going back decades. My name is Dorothy Johnson, she said, her voice barely audible. I'm 78 years old. I have voted for you in every single election since 1991. She held up the stickers. Then her voice broke. I believed in you. You were supposed to be one of us. You were supposed to remember where you came from. She began tearing the stickers one by one, letting the pieces fall to the floor like confetti. Never again, she whispered. Never again will I vote for someone who betrayed us. The image was devastating. A woman who had spent over 3 decades supporting Waters literally tearing apart those years of loyalty. Then Mr. Kim stood again, the Korean shop owner from 1992. He tried to speak but couldn't. His grief was too raw even after 33 years. He simply stood there, a living reminder of the cost of Waters' words. Kennedy's phone buzzed again. He read the notifications aloud, each one another nail in the coffin. House Ethics Committee to reopen Waters' investigation with new evidence. Federal Election Commission launching comprehensive review of slate mailer operation. Department of Justice reviewing potential campaign finance violations. Each announcement landed like a physical blow. Waters watched her world collapse in real time. She made one last desperate attempt, standing, her voice shaking. This is a racist attack. They're targeting a black woman who dares to speak truth to power. Kennedy stood as well, looking directly at her. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but carried throughout the room. Ma'am, I'm going to say this once, so please listen carefully. The room went absolutely silent. Corruption has no color, theft has no gender, betrayal knows no race. He pointed to the constituents standing in the gallery. The people you hurt most, they look like you. They trusted you because you were one of them. They believed you understood their struggles because you claimed to have lived them, and you betrayed that trust. He gestured to Dorothy Johnson, still holding her torn voting stickers. She voted for you for over 30 years because she believed in you. And what did you give her in return? A mansion you don't share, luxury she'll never know, and decades of neglect. Kennedy's voice grew stronger. You promised that little girl we saw earlier, the one with a hope in her eyes, you promised her a future. You promised her community would be uplifted. You promised her that someone was fighting for her. The screen showed the image again, the young girl standing in front of the rundown building. You didn't just break a promise, Kennedy said. You stole her future. You took donations meant to help people like her and gave the money to your daughter. You lived in luxury while she lived in decay. You built walls to protect yourself while leaving her exposed to violence. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but somehow it filled the entire room. You didn't just fail her, you betrayed her, and that betrayal has consequences. As if on cue, an announcement came over the committee room speakers. Due to ongoing investigations and credible allegations of corruption, Representative Maxine Waters' security clearance is hereby suspended effective immediately. She is removed from her position as chair of the House Financial Services Committee. Waters staggered as if physically struck. You can't do this to me. Kennedy shook his head slowly. We didn't do this, Congresswoman. You did. Every choice you made, every constituent you ignored, every dollar you funneled to your family, every act of violence you encouraged, you did this to yourself. Security officers began approaching. Waters' few remaining staffers looked away, unable to meet her eyes. The most powerful moment came when Waters had to walk past her constituents to leave. As she approached, they stood, not in respect but in silent judgment, and one by one they turned their backs to her. Dorothy Johnson, the 78-year-old who had voted for Waters for decades, held up her torn voting stickers one more time. As Waters passed, Dorothy whispered just loud enough for the microphones to catch, "Never again." Waters broke then, not theatrically, but really broke. Years of arrogance crumbled. Her shoulders shook. Security had to help her toward the door. The camera caught one final devastating image. Mr. Kim still standing, still weeping, still waiting after 33 years for an acknowledgement that would never come. As Waters was led past him, he didn't turn his back. He looked right at her, his eyes asking a question she couldn't answer. Was it worth it? The door closed behind Waters. The committee room sat in heavy silence. The committee room slowly emptied. Reporters rushed out to file their stories. Progressive activists left quietly, many in tears, but some people remained. Kennedy was packing his folders when Pastor Thompson approached. The men looked at each other for a long moment, then embraced. "Thank you," the pastor said, his voice thick. "Thank you for hearing us. For 30 years, no one listened." Kennedy stepped back, and there were tears in his own eyes. "I'm sorry it took so long. I'm sorry you had to suffer for so many years before anyone paid attention." "But someone finally did," the pastor replied. "Today, someone finally did." The camera caught the moment. Within hours, that image would go viral, not because of the scandal, but because of what it represented: reconciliation, acknowledgement, justice. That evening, news networks covered the story, but they didn't lead with the scandal. They led with the people. CNN interviewed constituents from Waters District. Story after story of neglect, abandonment, betrayal, but also hope. "I grew up thinking she was fighting for us," a young man said. "Learning the truth hurts, but at least now we know. At least now we can demand better." The stories flooded social media, not celebrating Waters' fall, but mourning what could have been. The hashtag #WeDeservedBetter trended. Not about revenge, but about representation. Not about punishment, but about betrayal. In Waters District that night, something unexpected happened. Not riots, not violence, vigils. People gathered in the streets peacefully. Neighbors who hadn't spoken in years came together. They shared stories, supported each other, organized. Pastor Thompson led a prayer service outside his church. "Not for revenge," he told the gathering. "For renewal, for healing, for the strength to demand better and the wisdom to choose better." Young activists moved through the crowd, registering people to vote. "We won't be fooled again," one said. "We'll pay attention. We'll demand accountability. We'll remember this lesson." Mr. Kim attended the vigil. He finally spoke publicly about 1992, about 33 years of waiting for acknowledgement. When he finished, the crowd surrounded him, embracing him, acknowledging what Waters never would. "Your loss mattered," they told him. "Your pain mattered. We see you, we hear you. You are not forgotten." Within days, 4 new candidates announced they would run for Waters' seat. Marcus Johnson, the restaurant owner who had lost everything. She never answered my calls. I will answer yours. LaShonda Williams, the bakery owner. I know what it's like to struggle. I won't forget. A young community organizer. We deserve someone who actually lives what they preach. And Pastor Thompson. For 30 years, I prayed for change. Now I'm going to work for it. The Democratic establishment seeing the writing on the wall through their support behind new community leaders. Real change was coming. Back in Louisiana, Kennedy sat on his porch as the sun set over the bayou. A local news crew had asked for one final interview. You ended a 44-year career today, the reporter said. How do you feel? Kennedy was quiet for a long moment. Sad. The reporter looked surprised. Sad? Sad for what could have been, Kennedy replied. Maxine Waters had a chance to make a real difference. She represented people who desperately needed help. She had power, influence, a platform. She could have changed lives. He looked out over the water. Instead, she enriched herself. She built a mansion while her district decayed. She encouraged violence while living behind walls. She betrayed everyone who believed in her. The real tragedy, Kennedy continued, isn't that she fell. It's that she chose to fall. Every step of the way, she chose corruption over service, luxury over loyalty, self-interest over the public good. That's what makes me sad. But, the reporter pressed, justice was served today, wasn't it? Kennedy nodded slowly. Justice was served, but it came 30 years too late. Think about all the people who suffered during those 30 years, all the businesses that closed, all the families that struggled, all the children who grew up in decay. Justice came, but at what cost? What should people learn from this? The reporter asked. Kennedy turned to face the camera directly. That their voice matters, that they have power. Those constituents who stood up in that gallery today, Dorothy Johnson, who tore up her voting stickers, Pastor Thompson, Marcus, LaShonda, Mr. Kim, they changed everything. He leaned forward. Not me, them. When people demand accountability, they get it. When they refuse to be fooled anymore, change happens. But they have to demand it. They have to pay attention. They can't wait 30 years like Waters' constituents did. Hold your representatives accountable, Kennedy continued. Don't just vote and forget. Pay attention to what they do, not just what they say. Watch where they live, how they spend campaign money, who benefits from their decisions. And when you see corruption, speak up immediately. Don't wait decades. Democracy only works when citizens actively participate in it. The final scene wasn't in Washington or Louisiana. It was in Waters' former district at a packed community center meeting a week later. Dorothy Johnson stood at the microphone, the 78-year-old woman who had voted for Waters for over 30 years, who had believed in her, who had been betrayed. I wasted 30 years of votes on her. Dorothy said, her voice clear and strong. I believed her promises. I trusted her to fight for us, and she used that trust to enrich herself while we suffered. She paused, looking around the room. But I won't waste another day. We won't waste another day. We deserve better, and we're going to get better. Who's going to run to actually represent us? She asked. Hands went up throughout the crowd. Young hands, old hands, black hands, brown hands, white hands. People who had lived in the district all their lives and understood its needs. Dorothy smiled. For the first time in the entire story, she genuinely smiled. That's what I wanted to hear. That's what this community needed to hear. The camera pulled back, showing the packed room, people talking, organizing, planning, a community that had been abandoned for decades finally taking control of its own destiny. The split screen appeared one last time. On the left, Waters' mansion at dusk, empty and hollow lights off, gates closed. A monument to selfish ambition. On the right, the community center full of people, full of light, full of hope. Windows glowing warm in the evening. The sound of voices raised not in anger, but in determination. Kennedy's voice came over the scene. Power built on corruption falls fast, but communities built on truth last forever. Today, justice wasn't just served, it was earned by the people who deserved it most. The camera stayed on the community center, people leaving but not before exchanging phone numbers, making plans, organizing for the future, children playing in the lobby, their laughter echoing, hope palpable in every frame. This is how democracy is supposed to work, Kennedy's voice concluded. Not from the top down, but from the bottom up. Not through charisma and empty promises, but through accountability and truth. Not through years of betrayal, but through moments of courage. Maxine Waters built a career on fighting for the little guy, but she forgot the most important rule: you can't fight for others while enriching yourself. You can't claim to represent people you've abandoned. You can't serve two masters, the public good and personal greed. Today, the people of that district learned they have power. They learned their voices matter. They learned that accountability is possible even if it comes late. And tomorrow, they'll begin building something better, not because a politician promised to save them, but because they saved themselves. The final image, the community center at night glowing with light and possibility. And above the door, someone had hung a new sign: "We deserve better, we demand better, we are better," fade to black.